This is a pair of sisters with completely different lives. The old sister is a billionaire CEO. The younger sister is just a lowly laborer. In the morning, the old sister wakes up in her silk pajamas, stretching lazily. The younger sister is in cheap pajamas. Then the old sister soaks comfortably in the bathtub. The younger has to wash her hair in a crowded toilet. The old sister has Western-style bread and coffee for breakfast. The younger sister had kimchi with rice. The old sister has a house full of expensive shoes and limited edition bags. The younger has a pair of broken heels. Just knock them off and keep wearing them. Finished organizing and ready to go out. The old sister has a chauffeur to take her. The younger sister has to rush to the subway station. She's on the subway with all the other workers. The two sisters used to love each other, but one day, Mom and Dad's argument broke the peace of the house. Mom decided to file for divorce because Dad was a loser. The younger sister chose to follow her father. The old sister chose to stay with Mom, although they were separated, but they still can't let go of each other. They met privately and shared interesting stories, but that day, Jay told Dami, Mom got married, her stepfather was very rich, and that she was going to America with them. He left without looking back. The younger sister was so angry that she ran over to him. The two of them fought together, but something unfortunate happened on the same day. Dad died in a car accident. From then on, Dami had to live with her grandmother, selling hot dogs. That day, Dami found an empty restroom. She took off her peeling heels. She skillfully took a black marker and scribbled on it. Then she switched to the other one and scribbled all over the torn area. Then she blew on it. After checking it carefully, she came out satisfied. At that moment, she saw the news of her sister's return to China, but she wasn't very excited, because she was about to attend an entrepreneurship sharing meeting, but she didn't realize that the guest of honor on the stage was her sister, Jay. With her stepfather's wealth, she started her own business at a young age. After the meeting, they went to a cafe. Jay asked Dami if she had any business ideas. Dami lied. In fact, her business is just selling hot dogs with her grandma. Jay asked Dami if she had a boyfriend. Dami lied and said her boyfriend was Dosan. He's capable, smart and has a future. And she met him yesterday? Jay laughed but didn't say anything. He saw the marks on Dami's torn shoes. He knew she didn't have the money to start a business. Before remembering, the photos she shared were all selfies. There was no sign of a boyfriend at all. And the name Dosan, Jay is even more familiar. She was Dami's childhood pen pal. But Jay didn't say anything, so he invited Dami to a social gathering in a few days. He said he wanted to meet Michiyama. Dami immediately refused, because she hadn't even seen Michiyama in over 10 years. But she didn't realize that, when she was leaving, she couldn't help but reveal her superiority complex. Not only did she criticize Dami for smearing her shoes, she also said she made up a non-existent boyfriend. Finally, she thanked Dami. She thanked her for making her realize that she wasn't wrong in choosing to follow her mom. Then she got into the car with a smug look on her face. Dami was so angry that she clenched her fists. She chased after the car and stopped it. She went to her sister and confidently said that she was going to the social gathering, and she's going with Michiyama. But after calming down, she just wanted to knock herself out. Where the hell did she find this guy? Michiyama. Her strange behavior attracted the attention of a man. When the girl got on the bus, he followed her in his car, and watched from afar, until the girl came to a hot dog stand, skillfully put on her apron. At that moment, Chi Ping froze in his tracks. The familiar figure next to her was the grandmother who had helped him many years ago, when he was kicked out of the orphanage. With all the money he had, he couldn't even afford to rent the cheapest apartment. When he was hungry, he could only watch others eat outside, but it was raining heavily. When he didn't know what to do, his kind grandmother took him in. She not only let him stay in her hot dog store, she prepared food for him. He hadn't eaten for a day, so he grabbed the food and gobbled it up. After he recovered, he took a look around the place. At the same time, he found the box in which his grandmother kept her money. The next day, Grandma came over in a panic. She was relieved to see that the money wasn't missing. Kai Ping could see that Grandma was worried, so he suggested to go with Grandma to save the money. He also asked her to open an additional account. Grandma wanted her granddaughter to get over the pain of losing her mom and sister. She asked Kai Ping to write a letter of comfort to her granddaughter, to show her sincerity. She even asked for her name to be put on the letter. Since she was a fictional character, Shidera picked up a newspaper nearby and used it as a reference. He wrote down the name of the math genius, Nam Du-san, but to his surprise, since then, they became close pen pals. They kept warming each other's hearts with letters. One day, Shibai realized that his account had been cancelled. Thinking that there was still money in it that he had earned, he went to his grandmother at once. Without a second thought, he denounced her for using his money, until Grandma brought out a bag full of money. She said she had no choice but to take it out, but she hadn't touched a penny of it. Ji Ping realized that he had wronged Grandma. he felt guilty and ran away with the bag. When he bought a ticket and was about to leave the city, Grandma came to see him and gave him a new pair of shoes. Then Grandma said to Ji Ping, "If you succeed in the future, don't contact him again. If things get tough in the future, you can come back anytime." Kai Ping's eyes instantly reddened, but he didn't respond to his grandmother's words. Before the bus left, he held back his tears and asked his grandmother why she was so good to him. If there was anything he wanted to do, he would fulfill it for her, but Grandma said she didn't need that. After a moment's hesitation, he finally let go of his stubbornness. He hugged his grandmother as tightly as he could. With regrets, he said goodbye to the person who loved him so selflessly. Even though Kai Ping is now a successful businessman and worth over $100 million, but he still feels guilty for what he did at that time. He didn't have the courage to face the person he wronged, but by chance, he found his grandmother with Dami. Grandma quickly recognized Kai Ping. She was shocked and delighted, but then she was worried and asked him if he had no place to go again. Shibai smiled and shook his head. He hugged her tightly. That day, Grandma came to him for help. It turned out that her granddaughter couldn't find the mountain in her heart, but she didn't want to lose out to her sister. She didn't want to be sympathized by her rich sister, because she lived with her father and grandmother. She's very happy with her dad and grandma. She wanted to prove that she was right in choosing to be with her father. Watching Damis' anxious tears, Grandma was so distressed, so she found Ji Ping. She asked her to help her find Dosan, but to her surprise, Dusan had been sending emails to Ji Pyong, looking for him to invest in his company. Ji Pyong went there in the night, but the scene was an eye-opener. At that moment, Dusan was being chased and beaten by his father. Not only did he lose his job, his career was in shambles. The next day, Ji Pyong told his grandmother about what he saw. He advised her not to look for this man. Not only would he not do Dami any favors, and she'd be ridiculed by her sister. At that moment, Dami called and told Grandma that she'd found him. It turned out that he was at the end of his rope. He was selling off his valuables. He posted his information on the internet. Dami accidentally searched for him. She recognized him as the man she'd always wanted. She was so happy to buy his stuff. Just as they were about to meet, Dusan was dragged away by a man. He was about to get angry, but he realized he was a famous investor. Dusan thought that Ji Pyong had read the email and was looking for investment. He was so excited that he almost fainted. He invited Ji Ping to his office to talk more. Before leaving, he wanted to give the items in his hand to Dami. Ji Pyong was so scared that he dragged him away from the scene. Then he showed him his letters to Dami. He told him the story of the letters. He finally realized that he wasn't looking for investment, but to play the role of Damis' boyfriend. They agreed to do him a favor, but they wanted Shibai to invest in their company. When he heard that, he immediately refused. He thought they were too weak, so they didn't reach an agreement. Kai Ping went home in despair, feeling sorry for his grandmother. The time for the party came soon. Tommy wore the new clothes she bought. She came to the party alone, and after reading Damis' letter, he was deeply touched by her letter, so he borrowed a suit and decided to do him a favor. It was the first time he'd been to a party like this. When she saw her mom and sister, she hid in the corner. Shidera came along. He didn't want to worry. Seeing the timid Dami, he was about to help him out. Then the light suddenly dimmed. Looking at the man in front of her, Dami didn't realize that Michiyama was really here. Injay was curious about Damis' boyfriend. Then, he tried everything. She was about to be exposed. Dami was struggling inside. At that moment, Michiyama suddenly took her hand and pulled it back. He explained that they're not starting a business, but a partnership, and he asked Dami to be the CEO of the company. But Injay still didn't believe her. He asked for Dusan's business card. Dusan hurriedly pulled one out. He introduced himself as a representative of Sansan Technology. Sister saw that the card was ordinary, so she asked where the company's financing stood, but he didn't seem to know what it meant. He was about to be exposed. Ji Pyong suddenly came over to solve the problem. He said he thought highly of Dusan's company, and that he was very positive about his company. Sister was speechless. To avoid being exposed, Ji Pyong deliberately called Dusan away. They pretended to discuss their professional knowledge. Seeing the two of them talking happily, Sister was very upset. Dami managed to get back in the game. After the party, Michiyama planned to take the bus home. In order not to let his sister look down on Dami, he took him to the parking lot. He asked him to drive Dami home in his own car. Shibai called a cab to follow him. After a long time, I found them. They were sitting together. Ji Pyong immediately sent a message to Dusan. He asked him to take Dami home, but he thought that if he left like that, he wouldn't be able to see her again. He was already attracted to Dami, so he ignored Shibai's request. He went back and gave Dami his business card. He said he'd never had a girlfriend, and Dami was happy to hear that. But Kai Ping, who was hiding beside the car, was jealous. He warned him not to contact Tammy again. But then, Michiyama received a message from Dami. When he saw how happy he looked, Shidera almost fainted, but he couldn't do anything about it. It turns out that Dami wanted to thank him for his help. She wanted to treat him to a meal, but his reply was too childish. He had no choice but to teach him how to reply. On the other side, when she received the reply, Dami jumped out of bed. She was so excited that she ran out to tell her grandmother that she'd seen him. At that moment, she didn't know that her real pen pal was Shidera. The next day, Grandma told her what Dami had said. Shidera was complaining about how poorly Michiyama had behaved. Grandma was worried. She was going to tell Dami the truth. But that day, Dami resolutely quit her job, even though she set the company's sales record not long ago. But her diploma prevented her from getting a job, so she started her entrepreneurial career with a lot of enthusiasm. Then she contacted Michiyama to give him a money tree. I'm going to his company now. Dusan forwarded the message to Ji Pyong. Kai Ping left his work at once. He couldn't bear to see Dami disappointed, so he drove to his company right away, and moved their office supplies to his office. To make it look more professional, Ji Pyong took out suits for everyone to change into. Just then, Dami arrived just in time. She was amazed at the size of the company. Then she said she quit her job. She wanted to start a business with Mr. Dusan. Everyone was shocked and speechless. After she left, Shidera hoped that would be the end of it. Grandma would tell Dami the truth. But Michiyama had already fallen in love with Dami. He wanted to keep it a secret, so he had the courage to negotiate with Shidera. But Shibai didn't think much of them. He thinks it's only a matter of time before their company closes down. But then good news fell from the sky. Sanshin Technology won the artificial intelligence competition. Kai Ping couldn't bear to break Dami's dream. I hope Grandma won't tell the truth. She wanted to make Michiyama the ideal place for Dami. Grandma asked him if he was so obsessed. Is he in love with Dami? On the other hand, he's trying to convince his coworkers to work with Shidera. His coworkers asked him if he was attracted to Dami. To the same question, Shibai shook his head and denied it. But Dusan was brave enough to face his heart. That day, Michiyama came to pick up Dami for a date. Unexpectedly, Dami asked to go to his office. This meant that Dami was coming to Shibai's house again. He had to go out in a hurry and bring all of Dusan's office supplies here. After the experience of the last time, this time, the packing was much faster. Two co-workers also cooperated to find a suit. We were able to finish the setup before Dami arrived. Dami brought out some snacks. She said it was a gift from her grandmother. Seeing a table full of his favorite foods, Shibai was touched. At the same time, he remembered the reason for his wish. On the Mid-Autumn Festival one year, Tommy asked Shibai what he wished for in a letter. As an orphan, he envied the family playing cards on TV, so he wrote that he wanted to play solitaire with his whole family. I can't believe that more than 10 years later, Tatsuomi still cared about it. She even brought her grandmother's handmade sweets. It warmed his heart. This meaningful birthday, he felt happier than ever. When he took Dami home at night, Dusan couldn't help but ask Dami, "Why do you like me?" Dami said, "Because you're my first love." But he was terrified. He was afraid of losing Dami. He envied Dami's feelings for Chi Ping. He returned all his expensive clothes. He didn't want to be the man in the letter. He wanted to be his true self, to win Dami's heart by his own efforts. But how long can this unreal relationship last? On the other hand, her sister, In-jae, with her stepfather's wealth, has become a successful businesswoman. However, she never imagined, no matter how smart and capable she is, even if she managed the company well, she couldn't stand up to her stepfather, who didn't care about her family. Not only did his stepfather take all of In-jae's hard work for himself, he even gave it all to his stupid son. In-jae was furious. In front of all the shareholders, he broke up with his stepfather and left. But as soon as he walked out the door, she couldn't stop crying. But she didn't give up. She planned to start her own business. With her excellent professional knowledge, she qualified for the annual Sandbox Entrepreneurship Program. But right at this moment, she saw her sister's rich and handsome boyfriend also appear here. At that moment, Kai Ping was watching the live broadcast of the conference on TV, and found out that Dami was also there. The scene was in full swing. A quiz will be held. From 400 people from all over the country, 40 people will be chosen as representatives. But I didn't realize that Dami, who had only a high school education, would be elected. Dusan, who was there with her, wasn't as lucky as she was. If no representative chose them as teammates, they would have been withdrawn from the event. Just as Dami was getting excited to receive her t-shirt, she turned around and saw her sister on the stage. Both of them were shocked. Dami wondered why her sister, who had a successful career, would come to a place like this, and her sister was surprised that Dami had been selected. Then she taunted Dami, "Why is your amazing boyfriend here?" Dami followed her sister's gaze. She saw Michiyama on the stage. The two of them looked at each other. Dusan lowered his head in embarrassment. In the face of Dami's direct questioning, he was nervous and didn't know what to do. He had never been so embarrassed. His sister came over to him to gloat. She scanned the QR code on his chest with her cell phone. He found out that he hadn't received any investment from the investor. Michiyama clenched his fists. He had the courage to tell Dami the truth. Dami let out a long sigh. In her opinion, this may be the best arrangement. She was not confident to have a companion in this long and difficult road of entrepreneurship, so she asked Daoshin to hire her as the representative of Sanshin Technology. But she didn't realize that her sister, was also planning to hire Daoshin as a teammate. One is a novice with no experience. The other is a professional CEO who has been running the company for many years. Doosan wanted to make a difference this time, but he still chose Delta. He wants to accompany Dami to start their passionate entrepreneurial career, and Kai Ping entered Sandbox Ventures as a mentor. He didn't know that Dami knew the real identity of Daoshin. That day, Grandma came to deliver food to Dami, but she didn't expect to meet the daughter-in-law who abandoned her son, the mother of Dami and Rinsai. They hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years. They talked about their past. When Dami got into a good university, in order to pay for his tuition, Grandma sold her hot dog store, but Dami, who loved her, chose to take a break from school. She had to buy her a food truck. She worked so hard to earn money that she even broke her leg. When she heard that, Mom burst into tears with guilt. Not far away, Kai Ping overheard their conversation and was very saddened. Before she left, she gave some food to Damis' mom. She asked her to take it back with her. It was her favorite food. Grandma couldn't calm her heart for a long time. She didn't even realize that her shoes were untied. Then Ji Ping came to her side. Kai Ping knelt down to help Grandma tie her shoes carefully. He complained that Grandma should have bought a new pair of shoes. He complained that Grandma should have contacted him earlier. Kai Ping thought that Grandma and Dami had suffered because of her. She'd rather hear her say that she shouldn't have taken that guy in the first place. That would make her feel better. Then he went to Dosan. He asked Dami how much she knew. He's now rejecting Shibai. He said that Dami only knows that I'm a small person. She didn't know about the letter, but she didn't let it upset her. Ji Pyong didn't want Dami to fail. He willingly put aside his company's business to be their mentor, but how long can he hide his identity? At the competition site, everyone is working together to prepare for the upcoming competition. Doosan's colleagues are worried that Dami won't be able to accurately explain the AI. They want to replace her, but Michiyama wouldn't have it. He still wants Dami to speak. When the two sides were at an impasse, Shibai came over. He said Damis' speech might not be a success, but if you go on stage, it'll be the end of you, and he guaranteed it. If Damis' speech fails, I'll invest in Sanshin technology in my own name. Then Kai Ping found Dami to help her revise her final speech, and reminded her of the details she needed to pay attention to. Dami lived up to her expectations. Her speech was a great success. She was unanimously recognized by the judges. It looked like she was going to get into the sandbox, but when it came to her sister's presentation, I realized that her concept was the opposite of Damis. Damis' concept is to use AI technology to recognize the authenticity of handwriting, but my sister's concept is to create a new font based on the original notes. At that moment, someone on the stage asked a question. If the two technologies collide, whose technology would be better? The atmosphere in the room became tense. After testing, Damis' AI technology couldn't recognize my sister's font. Doosan lowered his head sadly. Sister looked over in triumph. Dami knew she had lost. She slept on the sofa, physically and mentally exhausted. Shibai saw her and came over. He sat down quietly, looking at the sleeping Tammy. She remembered her grandmother's words. When she came to her senses, she realized that Tammy was staring at him thoughtfully. Shyly, he made an excuse to leave, but Dami chased after him. She wanted to know why he lied to her. Shibai was about to confess. At that moment, Doosan came running over. He told Dami that their project had successfully entered the sandbox. When Dami found out, she was so excited that she hugged Doosan. Kai Ping could only leave in embarrassment. Later, Dosan approached Shibai. He said he had answered Damis' questions for him. The reason why he got help from Shibai again and again was because they were like brothers. Ji Pyong was furious when he heard that. During the mentor selection process, Dami decided to give up the better investor and chose Kai Ping, who had always helped them. But when Kai Ping saw the list of share distribution, he said unceremoniously, "Anyone who's willing to invest in you is a fool." The distribution of shares was so even. Will only be a stumbling block for the representatives? But everyone thought that their friendship was strong. That will never happen. Shibai laughed helplessly. Then he could only explain to them, and told them to concentrate their shares in the hands of key people, at least 60%. Doosan immediately offered to give his shares to Dami. His colleagues were not happy about it. They thought they were working together. Then they got into a fight. Kai Ping couldn't stand it, so he got up and left. Dami chased after him and tried to explain to Ji Pyong, but Ji Pyong thought they'd fight like that for 100 million won. It's not going to last long. And what's worse than that, they can't even settle this share dispute. As the representative, Dami is the biggest problem. Watching everyone leave in anger, Dami was very frustrated, and Doosan looked at the list of shares in disbelief. He could never have imagined that things would turn out this way. On the way home, Doosan told Dami to forget what her colleagues had said, and the two co-workers went to the place where their dreams began, to drink away their sorrows. Thinking about the time when we were sworn brothers on a snowy day, because of Doosan's help, we are where we are today. Aizen felt guilty, so the two of them were willing to let Doosan take more shares, but they didn't want to give it to Dami, though she helped us solve a lot of problems. But one day, she would become a potential problem because of Doosan's deceitful behavior. At that moment, Dami knew her own shortcomings. She's working hard to find a solution. If she doesn't understand, she sends a message to Shibai for advice. But Shibai woke up with a shock. There were 461 messages. Kai Ping had a headache when he read them, so he found Dami immediately. He told her to learn to make choices. No matter which choice she makes, she'll be scolded. But if she's afraid of being scolded, she can't make any decision. Dami seemed to understand. Back at the office, she was instantly energized. She decisively made a new share distribution. She gave most of the shares to Du-san. Seeing that Dami was so determined, Ji Pyong didn't have a problem with it. The 100 million startup grant will be here tomorrow. Du-san told Dami to go back to the office. Talk to Ji Pyong alone. He's going to tell Dami the truth today. Ji Pyong advised him not to. If Dami finds out, everything will be over. Not only the relationship between them, even the future of Sanzan Technology. But Dosen didn't think so. Neither of them was convinced by the other. In the face of Michiyama's declaration of war, Shidera felt an unprecedented sense of pressure. On the way home, the more he thought about it, the worse he felt. So he turned around and went to Dama's house. That's when Dusan came to Grandma's house. Dami didn't know. Grandma told Michiyama not to say anything. She was worried that Dami would be hurt, so he went along with it. Grandma sent Dami out to buy groceries, and then she told him in a very serious way, "Thank you. You've made Dami happy. I hope Dami will have a smile on her face from now on. I have a problem with my eyes. As long as I can see Dami smile more often, even if I go blind, I won't regret it." Dusan was going to confess to Dami. When he heard his grandmother say that, he hesitated. When Dami came back from the grocery store, she ran into Shibai, so they got together with different intentions. Grandma pretended it was the first time she'd seen Ji Pyong. Ji Pyong said he had something urgent to tell Daisen, but Dosen didn't dare to come over. He tried to hide behind Grandma. Ji Pyong saw that Dosen seemed to understand what he meant. He was about to leave. Then Dami asked if he'd had dinner. He said he had a date with his brother, but he chose to stay. Then, in order to win Grandma's favor, the two of them tried to do the housework. At the dinner table, Dami gave Shibai a piece of fish. Ji Pyong was very happy, but when he saw that Dusan's fish was bigger, he was jealous. Grandma knew what he was thinking, so she swapped her own fish with Shibai's, and Dusan was not happy either. The atmosphere became delicate. After dinner, Tommy saw them off. Shidera wanted to make Dusan jealous. He said to Dami, "The questions you wrote before, I answered them all by email." Dami was shocked. She looked at him with adoration in her eyes. Shidera looked at Michiyama proudly. At that moment, he noticed a thread in Dami's hair. I was going to remove it, but he hesitated and gave up. He used the opportunity to talk to Dami about the shares. He took the strings out of Dami's hair at the same time. Seeing the two of them being close to each other, Shibai felt bad about it. On the way back, Shidera asked him, "I thought you were going to tell me about the letter. I think you don't have the courage." Dosen was very weak. He said he'd get off at the front. He'll take the bus back himself. Grandma could see that both Shibai and Dosen liked Dami, so she asked Dami, "Do you like the man you wrote to 15 years ago, or the man you see now?" Although she was surprised by her grandmother's question, but she said, "If I have to choose, I prefer the person I met 15 years ago." The next day, Shibai carefully checked the email from Dami, and found that their plan was very well done. But will it really go so well for inexperienced entrepreneurs? At that moment, Dami and Michiyama were on their way to the investor's company, but the investor is his sister's stepfather, mocked by her mom's current husband, but she doesn't dare to get angry. Seeing her girlfriend being bullied, Dusan couldn't stand it any longer. He smashed the business card on the table, shut him up. He told Dami that he couldn't work on this kind of project that he had to beg for. Then he left without looking back. Dami followed him. She chased Dusan to the roof. For his impulsive behavior just now, Dusan felt guilty. Not only did he ruin the project he had worked so hard for, he also caused Dami to have a bad relationship. He was like a child who had done something wrong. He couldn't look Dami in the eye. Looking at him, Dami kissed him. She wanted to calm him down. She thanked him for fighting for her. She decided to focus on the Vision Road project that he developed. But Chi Ping didn't think so. He thought it was a losing venture. But Dami was adamant. She thought it was a very meaningful project. Seeing her insistence, Kai Ping had to get a list. These are companies that love to donate to charity. They wanted to help Dami. As a token of appreciation, Dami asked him when his birthday was. She wanted to celebrate his birthday. Ji Pyong was stunned for a moment. He answered April the 7th. Dami suddenly remembered that Shibai and Dusan's birthdays were on the same day. She thought it was too much of a coincidence. The next day, Tommy started to visit each of the names on the list, but she was always turned away, even though she deliberately followed the clients to the suburbs. But she couldn't get a single sponsorship, so she went home and lost her way. What's worse, she stepped on cow dung with her high heels. Just when she was physically and mentally exhausted, Ji Ping arrived. Dami asked him what he was doing here. Shidera was evasive. He's obviously here to pick up Dami, but he wouldn't admit it. He looked up and saw a noodle shop on the side of the road. He lied that he liked the noodles here. That's why he comes here every week. Then he asked Dami to take a nap. She'll drive slower. Dami said she couldn't sleep in someone else's car, but the next moment, she sneered. Shibai looked at her with a fond look on his face. On this day, Tommy came to see Shibai with packaged noodles. Shidera remembered what he had said that day. Dami had remembered what he had said that day. He couldn't help but feel happy. He brought the revised plan to Dami. But when he got home, Dami looked at Kai Ping's revised plan. Suddenly, she realized that Shibai's handwriting looked familiar. She looked up a letter written by Michiyama many years ago. Then she took out the speech that Shibai had revised. Their handwriting was exactly the same. This puzzled Dami. At the same time, Shibai ate the pine nut noodles that Dami bought. His mouth was full of happiness. That day, Shibai parked his car in front of Michiyama. He handed out a headband that Dami had left behind. He said he found it while washing the car. When he saw how jealous Michiyama looked, Shibuya purposely closed the window to drive him away. He was so happy. Dusan was puzzled. He kicked down the bike next to him. Seeing Dusan's reaction in the rearview mirror, Shibai's face was full of smugness. But it's all just his fantasy. Looking at Dami's head flower, he couldn't help but smile. Then he confidently pulled up in front of Dusan and handed him the flower. But he wasn't as angry as he thought he would be. Instead, he rode off easily. Shidera slapped the steering wheel in anger, but he didn't realize, when he left the garage, his face was very ugly. Looking at the flower in his hand, he already had doubts. Then he asked his brothers to come out to drink with him. He ended up drunk on the table. Tetsuzan called Dami. He wanted him to take him in. Dami agreed. When they stopped the car, they met Ji Pyong, who gave them a ride home with the aura of a protagonist. Shibai's clothes were soiled by Tetsuyama's vomit. He had to change into Dami's clothes. When Shibai sat down to eat, Dusan came out with a dumbfounded look on his face. Tommy asked him if he wanted to spend the night here. Shibai said he didn't want to leave him alone, so the two men were assigned to sleep in the same room. In the middle of the night, the two men revealed their feelings. Dusan said he wasn't as rich as Ji Pyong. He only had one person, Dami, so he didn't want to be taken away by Ji Pyong. But Ji Pyong said he'd give all his wealth to Dusan. He told him to give up Dami to him. Dusan was speechless. That day, Tommy told her grandmother that she had a lot of questions, but she didn't dare to ask. Grandma knew that Dami was suspicious of Chi Ping's relationship with Dosan. She was very worried. The next day, Kai Ping came over. She told him, Tommy wrote a letter when she was looking for Michiyama. She put it in the bird's nest, where they had been communicating. If you bring the letter to him, Tammy would not suspect anything. But Shidera wanted to tell the truth, because he liked Dami. Grandma was surprised. You were the one who said you didn't like her. Now the two of them are dating well. It's too late for that. But Shibai is also very unhappy. Obviously it's his girlfriend, but now he has to give it up to someone else. When he got back to the car and calmed down, he sent a message to apologize to his grandmother. He apologized and said he'd go and get the letter from Dami and give it to Michiyama. He went to a familiar place and got the letter. But when he turned around, Dami was staring at him. Dami realized that Shibai was her first love. Her eyes reddened instantly. She was fooled like a fool when she realized that her boyfriend, Michiyama, had lied to her. He had been pretending to be her first love, but the real first love was Shibai, who had been watching over her. Dami's heart was in turmoil. She doesn't know who she likes. My coworker said it's easy to see inside. Observe them quietly. It's easy to see what's inside you. That morning, Tommy was staring at the sleeping Dusan. The sunlight poured on his face. The corners of Dami's mouth turned up slightly, confirming his heart. From the beginning, she had always loved the man in front of her, but fate always plays tricks on people who love each other. When the company of Dami and Michiyama was bought out at a high price, they were immediately disbanded. The investor would only take 3 technicians to the US. Dami was fired on the spot, and the termination of the contract requires a high compensation of $6 billion. The lawsuit will be a long litigation process. As the CEO of Sanzan Technology, she knows that we can't afford to lose our youth. Accepting the reality is good for everyone. Dami dressed up carefully. She came to celebrate Daoshin's birthday. First, she took a picture with him on the bus. Then she took him out for Western food. That's when she finally revealed the real purpose of the day. To persuade him to cherish his talent. To follow the investor to America. To pursue his dream. Dusan immediately understood what Dami meant. He left his seat without saying a word. In order to get him to let go of himself and go to America, Dami had to come out and say something cruel. You're not the one who wrote the letter. You were never the one I liked. After that, she gave the baseball back to him. On his birthday, he had the most painful farewell of all. He found his brother and cried his heart out. At the bus stop, Dami was in tears. Soon after, the three of them boarded a plane to America. Dami joined her sister in Ye's company. She used her busy schedule to paralyze herself. 3 years later, Dami and Dusan hadn't spoken to each other. When friends talked about them, they both avoided each other. But when it was quiet at night, they both cared about each other in silence. On this day, Kai Ping was invited to Dami's house for the holiday. The family had a great time making muffins and played cards together. After a long night's work, Shibai fell asleep on the couch. When Dami saw him, she carefully covered him with a blanket. In the middle of the night, Dami woke up. She found Shiping still skewering meat. They sat down to chat. They talked about how grandma's health had deteriorated since she stopped making hot dogs. So Ji Ping volunteered. He wanted to help grandma open another hot dog store. Dami refused. She said, "I'll open it if I have to." So he told Dami to think of him first when she was in trouble. On the other side of the ocean, Dosan and his brothers were on vacation. They were already on the plane back to China. The next day, Shibai bought a gift to express his love to Dami. He practiced in the air. He was on his way to find Dami, but he bumped into Mr. Dusan, who had just returned to Japan. He realized that he was only on a short vacation. He was relieved. He noticed the gift in Shibai's hand. After a moment's hesitation, he decided to take the initiative. He said it was a gift for Dami. Dusan's face looks a little uncomfortable for a moment. As he was leaving, fate played a joke on him. When he was going out, he passed by Dami. Dami sensed the figure she'd been waiting for 3 years. She chased after him. She realized that she had mistaken him for someone else, and she got spilled coffee all over her. She was in a terrible state. At that moment, she received a call from the office. The company's computer has been hacked. They demanded 300 million, won within 12 hours. The company's technicians couldn't crack it. The techs even suggested paying the ransom money to get the confidential files back. But Dami didn't agree for fear that they'd go too far. The ransom demand quickly rose from 300 million to 600 million. Dami called every phone number. He was still at a loss. At that moment, he suddenly thought of what Kai Ping had said. "I'm the first person you think of when you're in trouble." Just as he was about to dial Kai Ping's number, an unfamiliar number called. Hearing that familiar voice from 3 years ago, tears fell from Dami's eyes in an instant. She held her composure. She told Michiyama that she was fine. She was so choked up that she couldn't speak. It wasn't long before Michiyama's car arrived at the office. He marched into the office. He took off his jacket and started to decrypt the case. After more than half an hour of joint combat, the unlocking key was finally recovered. Knowing that she was fine, Dami collapsed in a flash. Michiyama rushed to carry her to the rest room. After a lot of confusion, Dami calmed down. Knowing that Dosan would be leaving next week, Dami couldn't hide her loss. Moreover, they hadn't seen each other for 3 years, but she was in such a mess when they met again. Dami was devastated. Then Shibai found out about the hacking of Dami's company. He came to check the situation. He realized that Sean had already been here and solved the problem. Shibai was very disappointed. At this moment, the 3 Dusan brothers were faced with a moment of decision. The last few days back home, they felt the warmth of their hometown. Now that their contracts have expired, they decided to stay in China. After making the decision, Daoshin ran all the way. He wanted to tell Dami the news, but he ran into Shibai on the elevator. Shidera stopped him from seeing Dami. Dusan questioned his right to do so. Shidera lied and said that he and Dami hadn't been in a normal relationship for 3 years. 3 years is long enough to change a relationship. When he thought of the proposal ring that he had prepared, Dusan left the office in despair. He wanted to call Dami to confirm. Dami thought he'd leave again. She didn't want them to get involved, so she hung up and turned off her cell phone. That night, Michiyama threw away the baseball he had given to Dami. He planned to start a new business. They asked his cousin to make a magazine. They wanted to attract more investors. At the same time, due to the last ransomware incident at his sister's company, the technician left the company in anger, and my sister happened to see this interview with Daoshin and his team. That's how Dami found out from her sister that they were staying. And then, she ordered Dami to recruit the 3 of them to join her team. Dami was worried that her company would hold him back, but she was afraid that they hadn't resolved their relationship issues. She had to come to see him. She told him that she wanted to recruit her sister, but he refused. He was convinced that Dami was already with Shibai. Remembering what Dami said about not being a believer, he said that he didn't like her either. He said he never wanted to see Dami again, let alone work with her. This made Dami feel an unexpected heartache. She sent a belated apology. She left in a hurry. Dusan, who thought he was deeply hurt by his love, he wanted to ride a bicycle like his father. He wanted to forget Dami with his tired body and the scenery along the way. But the more tired my body got, the clearer my mind became. The more I thought about him. Late at night, Dusan saw a figure from afar. It was Dami, who had come all this way. He didn't feel sorry for her. Instead, he complained about his grievances. He said that he had gone through a lot of trouble to get here. But how could you make it so easy? It's really hard for him to forget this relationship. How could he start a new life so easily? But he didn't say the rest. Dami said it back to him. It's not easy for me either. It was hard for me to find this place. They finally opened up to each other. Looking at Damis' haggard face and injured knee, Dusan painfully bandaged Damis' wound. He let her rest against him. The next day, Dusan carried Dami down the mountain on his back. Not only did they get back together again, he also optimized the autopilot program for Dami, and Dami finally recalled her former business partner. Next, the test drive of the self-driving program went very well. The driver's license was successfully obtained for Delta. The former partners hugged and celebrated. It's like going back to the moment when Sandbox won the championship 3 years ago. Back at Sandbox Ventures again, Dusan asked Dami the same question again. Why do you like me? Dami thought for a moment. She said seriously, you don't need a reason to like someone. Because it's you. You are that reason. When he heard that, he couldn't help but kiss her. And Shibai realized that with just one hand, Michiyama had won over all his memories. After all, Tammy's heart didn't belong to her. He said to Dami, I've been reading letters for 15 years, but I've never looked for you. But he went looking for you the same day he read the letter. That's why I wasn't the one in the letter. And that's how the two of them got over it. This is the end of the movie. Thank you and see you next time.